My name is Lucas. I'm 17, and for the past few months every Tuesday at 5:30, I sit on a stiff leather couch while a woman named Dr. Monroe tries to make me talk about things I've already buried. Across from me are my parents, my dad, Eduardo, and my mom, Carolina, watching me like they're waiting for some magical moment where I finally say what they want to hear. I didn't ask to be here. I didn't want therapy. This was their idea. They thought it would help us reconnect or whatever. That's what they said. But I know what this is really about. It's about Rafael, my half-brother, 21 now, from my dad's first marriage, and the reason I spent most of my childhood walking on eggshells in my own house. They won't say it outright, but I know they're trying to get me to say I miss him, that I'm sad we don't see him anymore, that I want things to be different, but I don't. And the worst part, I think they're more upset about me not missing him than they ever were about how he treated me when he was around. In therapy, I sit there and watch the way their faces change anytime Rafael's name comes up. My mom gets quiet. My dad's jaw tightens. They keep looking at me like I'm supposed to be broken over it, like I'm the one carrying some huge weight because he's gone. But I'm not. If anything, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years. Still, every session circles back to him. The therapist wants me to explore those feelings. My dad wants to understand my perspective. My mom just wants everyone to be okay again, but I can't give them what they want, because I don't miss him, and I don't feel bad about that. Rafael was born when my dad was still married to Sandra. I don't remember much from that time, mostly because I wasn't even born yet, but over the years, I've pieced together the story from things people said when they didn't think I was listening. Their marriage ended when Rafael was just a baby. According to the whispers and awkward silences, things fell apart fast. Some say Sandra cheated. I'm not sure if that's true, but whatever happened, it left a mess behind. By the time my dad met my mum, Carolina, Sandra had already planted herself as an immovable force in his life. She hated my mum from the start. That part I do know for sure. She made it obvious, not just through words, but through her actions. My mom told me once, years ago, that Sandra used to glare at her during drop-offs like she was trying to burn a hole through her with her eyes. When I was little, I didn't understand why Rafael acted the way he did. He was only a few years older, but the distance between us felt enormous. He'd come over for a week at a time, part of the shared custody deal, 1 week with us, 1 week with Sandra and her new husband. And every time he stepped through our front door, it was like a storm rolled in behind him. Looking back, it's clear. He had two different worlds pulling him in opposite directions, and he chose sides. Not just chose, he committed. Whatever Sandra felt toward my mum, Rafael absorbed it completely. He made it his mission to echo her disdain in every possible way. My parents were constantly dealing with legal stuff, more custody hearings, more conflict. I remember hearing the word court so often it became normal. And even though I was just a kid, I always sensed that Rafael was the reason the house felt like it was on edge all the time. He never even tried to hide his resentment. Not from my mom, not from me, not from anyone. When Rafael came over, it felt like we were all holding our breath. He'd arrive with this expression like he already hated everything and everyone in the house. The door would barely close before the tension kicked in. And no matter how hard my mom tried to make things feel normal, he made sure it never was. He didn't just ignore us, he actively went out of his way to be cruel, to my mom especially. He never called her by her name, only by whatever insult was on his mind that day. Sometimes it was quiet, like muttering under his breath when she walked past. Other times, it was loud enough for everyone to hear. I'd be sitting at the table eating breakfast, and he'd just say something nasty out of nowhere, like he wanted her to react, like he got something out of watching her hurt. And my dad, he tried to keep the peace. But that usually meant trying to smooth things over instead of actually stepping in. He'd say things like, "He's just confused," or "He's going through a lot." And every time he said that, I'd wonder, what about us? What about the people Rafael kept targeting? Didn't that count for anything? There was this 1 week, must have been around when I was 10, when Rafael barely said a word to me. But when he did, it was cold. He said, straight up, that I didn't belong in his family. that I was nothing but a reminder of everything that got taken from him. I didn't fully understand what that meant at the time. I just knew it hurt. Even when he wasn't directly insulting me or my mom, his presence alone filled the house with tension. He'd roll his eyes at everything we said, slam doors, leave messes he knew my mum would have to clean, talk back in ways that made silence seem like the only safe option. We weren't a family when he was there. We were just survivors, waiting for the week to end. It's hard to explain how words can stick with you longer than anything else. But with Raphael, they weren't just words. They were weapons. He knew exactly where to aim to make it hurt. He never once called my mum anything kind. Not Carolina, not even stepmom. It was always some insult, something to make her feel like she didn't belong, like she wasn't worthy of even basic respect. And he said it so casually, like it was just normal, like treating her like trash was expected. And for me, it was worse in a different way. He'd mock the way I spoke, the way I dressed, the things I liked. He'd call me names, cruel, ugly names, just to get a reaction. At first, I tried to laugh it off, pretend it didn't get to me. But I was a kid. I didn't have the tools to deal with that kind of steady, targeted meanness. I remember once we were in the living room. I was maybe 8 or 9. My mum had just walked in with snacks and offered him some. He looked her straight in the eye and said something so demeaning I froze. She didn't respond. She just turned around and left the room. And me? I just sat there, wishing I could disappear. What bothered me most wasn't just what he said. It was that he seemed to enjoy it. He looked satisfied every time one of his comments landed, like hurting us gave him power, and it worked. Because after a while, I stopped talking when he was around. I avoided the kitchen when he was eating. I even stopped inviting friends over during his weeks, just so I wouldn't have to explain the atmosphere. Every insult chipped away at the sense of safety I was supposed to have in my own home. He made sure I never forgot where I stood in his eyes, beneath him, unwanted and barely tolerated. And no matter how many times my mum tried to create peace, it was never enough. Because Raphael didn't want peace. He wanted control. There was this one time, I think I was around 10, when Raphael leaned in close to me and said something that made my stomach twist, even though I didn't fully understand what it meant. It wasn't just mean, it was dark. He wanted to shock me, to make me feel small. And he succeeded. The worst part is that he smiled afterward, like it was some kind of joke, like hurting me was funny. Back then, I didn't have the words to explain how it made me feel. I just knew I wanted to disappear. I remember avoiding my mum for the rest of the day, too afraid to repeat what he'd said. I thought I'd get in trouble just for knowing the word. I didn't even ask what it meant. I just buried it. But I never forgot the way it made me feel, cold, confused, and ashamed. He called me names all the time, words meant to question who I was, words that tried to strip away my dignity before I even knew how to build it. And I couldn't understand why no one stopped him. My dad would scold him sometimes, but it was always a few words and then silence. No real consequences, just more tension, more pretending. By then, Raphael didn't need to raise his voice. Just a look, a smirk, or one of those whispered insults was enough to ruin my day. And it wasn't just about me. He would throw those same looks at my mum, the woman who cooked his meals, folded his clothes, and still tried to treat him like family, even when he made it crystal clear he didn't see her that way. I don't think people realize how much it changes you to live with someone like that. Someone who doesn't need to hit you to make you hurt. Someone who knows how to tear you apart with a few well-placed words. He never touched me, but that doesn't mean he didn't leave bruises. Raphael was 17 when he started fading out of our lives. At first, he'd just skipped the occasional week. My dad would make excuses. He's got a lot on his plate, or he's just figuring stuff out. But it became more frequent. Less time with us, shorter visits. Then suddenly months would pass before we saw him again, and every time he didn't show up, I felt lighter. I remember the first birthday he missed. I didn't say anything out loud, but I wasn't disappointed. I didn't want him there. The air in the house felt different that day, cleaner, quieter, like we could finally relax without waiting for something to explode. By the time he turned 18, he'd practically vanished. No more weekly visits, no more texts, no more walking through the door with that look that made everything tense in seconds. And slowly, that toxic fog he brought with him started to lift. It took a few more months before he stopped coming to family events entirely. He stopped showing up at our grandparents' for holidays, and when his absence became permanent, my parents acted like it was this tragic loss, like someone had died. But for me, it was like finally being able to breathe in my own house. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't cheer or throw a party, but I remember sitting on the couch one night just watching TV with my mom and realizing that the silence wasn't temporary anymore. He wasn't coming back, and that silence felt like safety. My dad missed him. That part made sense, it was his son. But my mum, that hurt in a way I didn't expect. After everything Raphael said and did to her, she still seemed heartbroken over his absence. She looked through old pictures like she was searching for the version of him that maybe somehow she still believed could exist. But I wasn't looking back. I was finally learning what peace felt like. It happened during one of our usual Tuesday sessions. Doctor, Monroe had just asked a question, something about how I felt since Raphael stopped coming around. I don't remember the exact wording, but for once I didn't hold back. I told them the truth. I said I was glad he was gone, that I didn't miss him. Not even a little. That life was better without him in it. As soon as the words left my mouth, the room shifted. My dad's face tightened like I'd just insulted him personally, but it was my mom's expression that hit me the hardest. She looked devastated, like I'd betrayed some unspoken family rule. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me like she didn't recognize who I was. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "I never wanted you to feel that way." Dr. Monroe stepped in quickly, trying to slow things down, trying to steer the conversation into something productive. She reminded them, gently, of what Raphael used to say to me, how he treated both of us, the damage that had been done over the years. But it didn't matter. My parents weren't hearing her. They were too focused on what I had just admitted. For them, that moment was a shock, but for me, it was a release. I'd carried that truth inside me for so long, afraid of how it would land if I ever said it out loud. And now that I had, I wasn't sure what to feel. There was a part of me that felt stronger, more honest, but another part that suddenly felt guilty, like I'd crossed some invisible line. They thought I'd be sad, that I'd long for some kind of reunion. But all I felt was clarity. I didn't miss him, and I wasn't sorry. After that session, things at home got weird. Not explosive, not loud, just cold. My dad barely spoke to me the rest of the evening. He sat at the dinner table, pushing food around his plate, like he was trying to solve a problem he didn't know how to name. My mom, on the other hand, couldn't even look me in the eye. She cleaned the kitchen in silence, methodical and distant, like she was trying to pretend nothing had been said, even though we both knew that wasn't possible. It was like I had shattered some illusion they were both clinging to, like by speaking the truth, I'd broken something sacred. The next session came around, and Dr. Monroe tried again. She gently revisited Raphael's behavior, how consistent it had been, how damaging. She asked my parents if they remembered the way he used to speak to my mum, the things he said to me, the chaos he brought every time he walked through the door. They nodded slowly. My dad even admitted, for the first time out loud, that it had been hard to manage Raphael back then, that the house did feel different now. But then he said something that stuck with me. "He's still my son." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That sentence said everything. My mom sat quietly the whole time, her hands folded in her lap. When the session ended, she looked at me and said she just wanted us to be a family again, that she didn't expect me to forget, but she wished I could find it in my heart to care. But how do you care about someone who spent years making you feel worthless? I wanted to scream, to ask why my feelings were so hard for them to accept, why my pain had to come second to their grief, because that's what it felt like. Like I wasn't allowed to be relieved, even when every part of me finally felt safe. I didn't even know my dad had told anyone until a few days later, when Uncle Henrique called me out of the blue. At first, I thought it was just to check in. He does that sometimes, but this time felt different. His tone was sharp, serious. He said he'd heard about what I said in therapy, that I told my parents I was glad Raphael was gone. I stayed quiet, waiting to see where he was going with it. Then he let out this long sigh and said, "Lucas, some things you just don't say, not to your parents, not like that." I didn't respond right away. I was still processing the fact that my dad had shared what I said in confidence, with his brother no less. It felt like a betrayal, like even in therapy where I was supposed to be safe, I couldn't really speak freely. Enrique went on about how hard it must be for my dad, how complicated families can be, and how I should have been more sensitive with my words. He said, "Even if that's how you feel, sometimes it's better to keep it to yourself." That sentence hit a nerve. I asked him calmly, "Why is it always about protecting their feelings? Why wasn't anyone protecting mine?" There was a pause, a long one. Then he said something vague about how life isn't fair sometimes, and how we all have to make sacrifices for the sake of family. But I've made sacrifices. I swallowed years of insults. I kept quiet through all the chaos Raphael caused. I watched my mom cry in the bathroom while everyone pretended things were fine, and now that I've finally said what I feel, I'm the one being scolded. That phone call didn't make me feel guilty. It made me angry. Not because I didn't expect some backlash, but because it confirmed exactly what I feared. Even now, after everything, I'm still the one being asked to stay silent. Since that day, the air at home has stayed thick. My parents don't bring up Raphael anymore, not directly. But it's always there in the way they glance at each other when I talk, in the way they sometimes pause before answering me, like they're wondering if I'll say something wrong again. I still go to therapy. I still sit on that same couch across from the same faces, but now everything feels different, like the truth I let slip out changed the rules of the game. I think about it a lot, what I said, not because I regret it, but because of how heavy it landed. How saying out loud that I feel better without Raphael in my life made everyone act like I'd confessed to something monstrous. But I didn't lie. I told them the truth. I don't miss him. I don't feel bad that he's not around. I feel safe. I feel free. And yeah, maybe I even feel happy, or at least lighter. That has to mean something, right? What I don't understand is why that makes me the bad guy. Why my relief makes everyone else so uncomfortable. It's like there's this script I was supposed to follow. Pretend to be sad, pretend to want him back, pretend to believe that blood always matters more than peace. But I can't do that. I won't. He made me feel like I didn't belong in my own home, like I was never enough, like my mom didn't deserve kindness. And now that he's gone, I finally have room to breathe. So I'll ask you, am I really wrong for being honest about how I feel? Am I the asshole for not missing someone who never gave me a reason to?